what is toxic masculinity? Is it how we feel? Who we are? Is it our own sense of identity? Or is it something that we mask ourselves in to hide ourselves from the bitter truth? A lot of the time, it can feel like a lot of men reach that breaking point where they get flooded by emotion that feels like a tsunami hitting against them. Because men are taught to suppress all of their waves, never embrace it, never feel that engulf of water and grit flowing into them. So they never feel what it's like to be on the bottom of that emotionless pit, because they're always used to floating on top. However, when it does hit, the whole city comes crashing down before they even realize it. And because they don't realize it, they overlook their own mental health issues, which is why I think 75% of suicides are male, because they don't see their own key issue. But with this project, we're going to see what we can do to change that. Hello, my name is Alex Caton, and today I'm here to find out the truth about why toxic masculinity exists today, and why it affects us currently in this world. But to do this, we have to look back and search deeper into what it's really all about. Toxic masculinity is defined as a cultural and societal behaviour for men to act in a certain way. Examples of this would be told to toughen up because that's what a man needs to do, or don't show emotion, but then self-suppression happens, then they resort to things like alcohol, and then violence breaks out on other people. So, let's see how this really fares now.
So if we start off with the 1700s and really look back at gender expression at the time, men didn't have to be toxic masculine or this macho person. They were a lot more self-expressive. They had to be funny, determined, intelligent, and courageous, and there wasn't so much focus on having to be this big dominant person. This even showed through the clothing at the time.
Back then they wore usually a waistcoat, some breeches, and a dress. This wasn't really questioned as this was the social norm. So you'd see men wearing waistcoats that went from the leg to the hem, but nowadays a skirt or a dress would be considered feminine, and wearing a makeup as a man would make you gay somehow, even though back in the 1700s to the 1800s they wore it just for fun.
I'm Alex.
I'm Milena.
And today we're going to do an interview on toxic masculinity. So first of all, have you ever had any experiences with toxic masculinity?
I did. As a woman, I can approve this. When I was 14, my friend texted me if I want to go to the church with her, and I'm like, okay, yeah, why not? So we arrived, there's this mass and gatherings, then we have some treats, and then this guy wasn't a priest, he was like the back member of the church, like a deacon. And
I do know that.
Yeah, like the bell stuff when there's the body of Christ and stuff like that. And there was some treats. People bring in treats, they have coffee, tea and stuff like that. And then my friend left me, like she was on the phone doing something. I was there by myself because I was anxious. I found hard talking to people around me. I felt like, would they go and judge me, even if that's women or men? And he started asking me like question like, if I have social medias, if I have Facebook, email, or my phone number, but I said I don't have. I mean, I did say I have my phone number, but I didn't give him any of these because I felt scared, and also I barely knew him, so. And then I think we switched to a topic where I felt a bit comfortable, where we started talking about my cats, and I showed him a photo, and then he just took my phone and started scrolling, and I was like,
creepy guy.
That was very creepy. I felt comfortable. Don't you ever scroll through my photos ever again. That's weird.
It's like people's personal privacy.
Yeah, and then after that, my friend's like, oh, do you want to go to my aunt's? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So we get in his car, even though my parents told me don't go inside a stranger car because you never know what will happen.
Stranger danger.
Yeah. And I learned my lesson from that. I shouldn't go because you never know what's gonna happen, and you never know if you're ever gonna come back home. You know.
How old were you when this happened?
I was 14.
So like you'd only just started like high school, really.
I was in high school, and I still remember the date. It was on 20th of May 2018 around 11 a.m.
Yeah.
It was Sunday. And then in the car, when we were on the roundabout, he's like, you know, if you ever plan coming to this church again, you know, I can always pick you up from town or from your house, and then I can give you a ride. I'm like, no, I'd rather walk, you know. I don't know him much, even though we talk a little bit. I did come across like is it cat talking or
Cat calling?
Yeah, cat calling, not cat talking, cat calling.
Yeah.
When I was in my first year of college, I was wearing this skirt. I just wanted to, you know, look nice for a day, and this one homeless man, like near town, he's like, oh, you have really sexy legs. I'm like, I heard this. I had my headphones on, and I literally heard him saying this. I wanted to back out and look at him and just say, like, you know, fuck off. But I didn't do that because I don't want to embarrass myself or something. I should have done
that.
It's not
embarrassing. You should have definitely done it.
I should have done this. Which is I find it annoying, and so, you know, I sometimes think, could that be to do with because it's not me that gets harassed. I mean, there are plenty of women out there who do, and I'm always scared. You know, I wish I was just a normal girl. You know, normal features, and you know.
You are normal. What defines normal?
I hate my face sometimes, you know. With
No, I don't.
Because people like in high school, they would tell me, "Oh, you look pretty. Do you wear makeup?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't wear makeup. I did wear makeup when I was in year 9. That's when I started. But like in the past, you know, they would either just pick me and be like, "Oh, you're wearing makeup. I'm gonna tell the teacher," something like that. And I would be like, "Okay, go."
Makeup should just be there to look artistic and
like
cool
cover.
And cool if you want to. Like, it should be just like a personal preference thing. And I think men should be able to wear makeup too. Like, I think if like there wasn't so much male judgment, more men would be like wearing makeup. Because if you look back at the Egyptians, a lot of men actually wore makeup. Because back then it wasn't like, oh, it's gay. You know, it wasn't like that. It was more like they had it as a sign of wealth.
Men wearing makeup went far back as the Egyptian times. When Cleopatra was in charge, she actually invented makeup not for a specific gender, but to show a sign of wealth. So back then, if you were wearing eyeliner, the amount of eyeliner you had on would constitute to the status of your wealth. So the more you had on, the wealthier you were. If someone was just ill or unhealthy in general, they'd put on green eyeshadow on them because they believed by doing this, the god Horus and Ra would fight off the illness. Coming mid-17th century, things started to change because England and other places were becoming more gendered. So clothing like high heels became for women, and men's shoes became, well, a lot sturdier and broader, and for women the high heels became higher, narrower and more ornamental. The funny thing about this was the women and the men used to cross-dress each other during this time, and women dressed as men so they could get the higher job opportunities, which showed the internalized misogyny that is presented through toxic masculinity and having to be dominant. However, coming in the mid-1800s, moving into the 1900s, this is when things started to get more religious. Especially since Queen Victoria was in power, and she even stated that men couldn't any longer wear a dress because that is ideally feminine. So you stop seeing men wearing makeup that they used to wear as just part of cultural tradition, and short skirts stopped trending within men, and instead that was seen as wrong. And Victoria stated that makeup was considered an abomination by her and the Church of England. So this created widespread association with makeup, vanity, femininity, and what's considered the devil's work. Did you ever have any like toxic masculine experiences when you were younger?
Yes, I did. When I was in high school, I obviously had a feeling for a specific person, and I've bottled that up for quite some time. And when I eventually revealed it to him, he was very aggressive towards me. He found me being weak. He found me that, having feelings towards a male makes you look more feminine than, having that kind of persona, being the courageous one, being the masculine one. So I ended up getting bullied because of that. So I have had experience of toxic masculinity, even when I was younger too. Back at home in Nigeria, I never knew that I was quote unquote different. And then obviously my friends at school kind of saw some signs I were. And then they kind of, bullied me, made fun of me, never involved me in stuff like that. And it was extremely hurtful. So yeah, I have had experience, fortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's sad that there's misogyny rooted in toxic masculinity as well, because as you were saying, you got called feminine and stuff, so it's saying that being feminine is almost seen as weak.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a problem too.
To tackle.
Yeah, that's a problem to tackle. How do you deal with homophobia now?
Right now, a lot of my friends are very supportive, so I'm dealing with it much better than I was in high school, because when I was younger, especially in Nigeria, homophobia was the norm. It was very common. So people, a lot of men hated other men that were gay, or they expressed themselves being quote unquote different from other people. But nowadays, more people are being educated, more people are aware of the LGBTQ community, so they're more accepting to it. So they're willing to learn more and encourage other people, especially men that are gay, to be more of themselves, rather than being closeted or putting on a facade again of being straight, or being what society deemed men as to become. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think nowadays in society it's a lot better when it comes to homophobia, because I feel like it's a little bit less. I mean, I'm not me being ignorant, but from my experience, I'm saying that it is less than when I was younger, coming to England.
I think it's also because we're more knowledgeable, because we have things like the internet and stuff to educate ourselves.
I agree.
So, personally, what I took away from this is that Victoria just couldn't handle the fact that men could pull off makeup way better than she could. We started seeing men become more violent as well and act out more at this point, because they had to internalize everything in fear of being themselves. And I think that's what makes coming out so hard for people today. But it has got a lot easier now than ever. Speaking of colour though, the reason why pink changed is not what you think, actually. This all started because of the Victorian era, because back then pink was seen as a lighter red. And red was associated with war because red is the colour of blood. This all changed because of a woman called Mary Eisenhower. Mary Eisenhower was the first lady of Dwight Eisenhower, who was a former president and commandant of the D-Day force. She was a fashion icon at the time, and pink was the colour everyone associated with, even though at this point in time pink was seen as a more masculine colour and blue was the norm, as it's seen as more dainty. Back then, she even had her own house called the Pink Palace, and in society she was known as the Mother of Pink. And then, because of her wearing pink, pink became a more feminine colour. However, it still wasn't looked at as feminine and female properly until World War II. Because in World War II, Hitler marked all the gay men with this pink triangle before they were gassed to represent the minority. And from then on out, pink was not seen as a masculine colour, and you'd be ridiculed as gay or feminine for wearing it.
You could even say it's the original LGBT flag.
Hello everyone, welcome to the documentary on toxic masculinity, where I'll be exploring the history of it and how it affects us today. So today I'll be speaking with Mr. Souleye to talk about his experience on it. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and also a few things to do with your book. So would you like to tell us a bit about your book first, that you got coming out?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, so basically, it's this manga / comic book. And I say manga / comic book because traditionally mangas are black and white.
Yeah.
And comic books usually have color in them, and Oblivion Rouge has a bit of color in the story, sort of as like these symbols on.
Yeah.
And so the story like follows Umi, who's in this world, this continent, where a virus is taken over, and only one section of this continent has the cure, but they don't want to share it. And so this mysterious exterior army comes in to give aid to a certain sense and help. And Umi is recruited by this army and is trained to sort of fight and protect, these innocent people who are being like attacked because there's. So yeah, it's a crazy story. There's so much more, and I'm really enjoying creating it.
How would you say toxic masculinity sort of affects you as like a person of color? Because obviously I feel like it's different because you got a double standard there. Like,
I think it's complicated. I think it's a lot of like cultural cues that get reinforced.
Yeah.
And it can be tiring and like really taxing most of the time because it's so much of a bravado and so much of a conditioning. What's crazy is that it's consistently around you, and it's something you can tell that it's a performance. You can tell that it's like either they're hurting or it's a performance.
How did the George Floyd stuff like affect you when all that was happening?
And I was actually in Senegal when it happened.
Yeah.
And seeing it, I'm trying to remember, it was just very. I think like for me, it just felt inevitable.
Yeah.
I think it was so. Like so much of being in the U.S. is about that. It's about this consistent. And maybe it hasn't changed, but it's become more aware of it. I'll be like on the train, and I'll hear people talking about, like racism. Like it just comes up. You know what I mean? Like I think before George Floyd, it was very much like hush hush. Like no one would talk about it, and it was something that was a little bit taboo, I think. But now it's become more of a topic. Conversation, and then people have that conversation more frequently, which is good.
Yeah.
And so the George Floyd thing, it was tough, seeing my friends, going to these protests, and like I was also like kind of scared. I was like, oh my god, like don't want to get hurt or anything, because police, pretty brutal and all that. And so it was scary on one end, but it was also like this needs to happen.
Yeah.
It really needs to happen, and it's gone from micro to macro, and that's really important.
That's scary to like think about. Like it just a lot of the time it feels like the wrong people have power, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they want it more.
Yeah.
I always think that the people who actually want power are the ones who like so good at like.
Yeah.
Who either have had it their entire lives and are afraid to lose it. Right? It's like maybe it's one of those where it's like.
Yeah.
Once like losing something, is a lot harder than being.
Like and. The men who are like mentally struggling because of like any problem, like it's really hard because with the world we live a lot of the time, especially like high school or whatever you call it in America. I don't know what.
High school is high school.
Yeah, high school or secondary school or whatever. But like for me, secondary school was where it was most dominant because people just want to do that just to fit in, and they're going through like changes and everything. But like a recent like statistic I found from the Mental Health Foundation was that only 36% of NHS referrals for therapy were for men, which I thought was just absolutely like mind-boggling. And like I feel like it shouldn't be that low, and men should just be able to talk more freely about it. But it's so like built into our system of like, oh, I have to be strong, I have to be this, I have to be that. And I think, and a lot of that comes from the war and all of that because of like the trauma and stuff they face through and having to be in that environment a lot of the time. And I feel like we're trying to undo that all now, but at the same time, it's sort of going backwards, but we're not. So it's sort of like this weird balance. But I want to make sure that we just sort of get over that and it becomes a more open topic.
No, I absolutely agree. I think yeah, it's just like, it's in a lot of things. It's like, because I think the sort of mask,
Yeah.
you know, is very the culture of the world. It's like, that's how we operate within mass culture, and that's just like
Yeah.
not true. Not everybody is like that. Not
Yeah.
everybody wants to be like that, and most people like hate it, you know.
Yeah.
So I just, some people are just afraid to say it, but it's very toxic. It's not egalitarian at all. It's not helpful. And more people are fighting, you know, especially in the trans group.
Yeah.
A lot of LGBTQ are like really doing a lot of work in all levels, all forms, arts, in culture, and everything, you know. So I think that's where like the real change happens. Usually, yeah, it's always so weird. It's like artists and music too, with the big music scene. And it's just like that really changes stuff in the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
Gets on people's hearts and change people's feelings and stuff. And only art can do that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my film is sort of like an artistic form, even though it's not like drawing art. What would you say is like a big part of like black masculinity? Like, what's a big thing that goes into that? Would you say slavery sort of also contributes to that?
I think it's not much. I mean, you could go all the way back to slavery, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of like a lot of things. I don't really know too much about how that manifested, but I do know it has manifested in this sort of, there's different ways to talk about it. There's like a certain kind of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Within that, like I think, like the way society has sort of set it up is that in a way it's like white men at the top, then it's white women, then it's black men, then it's black women, and I think the experience of a black man is like, it's more, there's a sort of like superiority complex where you're, or maybe that's not the word, but it's like more like this desire to sort of like this like ideology that you have to be, you know, strong. You have to be
dominant.
Dominant and very aware and protective all the time, and to not sort of like definitely not share emotion. Definitely not to be hard. Literally to be hard, and it's complicated, and a lot of young men, like in certain communities, are like, you know, have a tough time talking about, you know, these things that are going on. May they be like within their family or in school or anything like that. It was just, it's like expressed through with like any kids, you know, any kids will, you know, sort of like flip out, you know, when their lives, you know, they're able to understand their lives. But I think especially these young men, they're they lash out and they get really aggressive, or because of their situation. And I think it's a lot of the time it is toxic masculinity, but it's also, I think the way that the masculine aspect works is that it's a coping mechanism a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's really the systems around these people's lives that are perpetuating it.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in schools, they're just segregated, old red lines, segregated neighborhoods. That just persist through time.
I find it scary how it's so ingrained since your childhood. You go into a secondary school or something, and then if you do something that's not masculine enough, they'll tell you to man up or be a man, which I hate that phrase so much, because it puts the idea that having feminine traits or just expressing yourself is wrong, and I think that's just a stupid idea, because we should be allowed to love ourselves for who we are, and it shouldn't be shamed. But unfortunately, with the society we live in, a lot of the time it is.
Yeah.
But we don't really notice those little details until we sort of look back on it, and it's wow.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with weakness. What we see as weak.
Yeah.
And what a lot of that culture sees as weak, and then there's this desire. I mean, it's it's like we're doing it to each other a lot of times too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of time my situation when I was younger was consistently people being why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? Don't do it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
That was that. It's just that's how it continues and perpetuates.
I mean, it was difficult for me. I mean, maybe not in the same way for you, but because I had epilepsy when I was younger, when I was 3 to 6, I had to catch up with everyone else, and sort of get mentally to the same place that everyone else was. So I was sort of held back. So a lot of the time I struggled to fit in, because I'd been set back because I did year 2 twice. So when I was in high school, maybe it was kind of difficult to fit in, and I didn't really fit in with the people there. So I got called retarded and stuff, and sort of ableism, just because I struggled, and it was just so casual. And when I was actually wanting my friends to be there for me, they just tell me to man up, and that's when I started having lots of anxiety issues, and that's when it started getting worse for me. I really didn't gain any confidence until I left school and got out of college, because by year 10 and 11 I was just in my worst state. I was self-harming. I was depressed. I was at my worst. But and because of my one friend, I was able to get out of it, and he also showed me my heroes. So anime and has always been a big part of mentally helping me get over it, and eventually I was able to stand up to the people who were treating me like shit, and I from there I just gained a lot more confidence, and also surrounding myself with the right type of people just really helped change everything when I got to college, because I ended up just dumping those people, and then just really starting to become more confident. I'm still not as confident as I want to be, but I'm really noticing a change in myself, and it feels quite relieving, and I think that's a great feeling to have.
Yes. Yeah. That freedom, that feeling of
yeah,
you're taking ownership, and you're you're doing it for yourself too,
yeah,
because I think a lot of that stuff too is you're doing it for someone else that feels wrong, but you're still doing it.
Yeah,
and they're not sort of recognizing that this is not making you feel good is just sort of oppressive.
Yeah, and it's also telling yourself to fit in with that masculine ideal of keep it all to yourself. I mean, for me, it was just finding new people and just just allowing myself to slowly go away. I'm still like trying to move on with everything, but it's like just making those little changes little by little over these past few years have just really just like changed my mindset, and looking at my brain and my problems from an outside perspective has just really helped me quite a lot. And like My Hero almost in a way showed me that. But what I was trying to remember earlier was how like before change wasn't scary because I was trying to change to fit in with everyone else. But that's what it was when I was at my worst. But when I was changing for myself, that was the scariest part, because it means I was being vulnerable. But almost I prefer changing for myself because it means I get to develop into the person I want to be, instead of like living in this like anxious shell, which I absolutely hated. So now I'm trying to find who I am. It's just quite scary, but also quite exhilarating at the same time, because it's like, oh, I'm slowly just breaking my egg and just becoming who I am, and that's exciting.
For sure.
Yeah, and also like a value that I learned from like having depression is more like a teacher. It's not something you should be like afraid of. I see it as more like something to help you build you into a better person. But you just gotta like sort of take all that emotion and look at it from an outside perspective instead of like an inside, because when we look at it inside, we have all those thoughts of like, I can't do this, or like body issues or like whatever. But when we look at it from an outside perspective, we can sort of see those issues and analyze them and sort of learn to like uncover them, even if it's just by little by little. Some people might be able to do that very quickly, but for others it's one of those things that takes time to undo all the problems that you've had. And whether that's doing it on your own or surrounding yourself with the right people or getting a therapist is really important. Yeah. So I think just like allowing yourself to see depression as something healthy, and it means you're working towards a better version of yourself.
That's right.
So being depressed shouldn't be seen as something that's taboo.
In my family, there are people who've like dealt with being bipolar, and it's run in my family, and like there's like different ways of dealing with it. I think some people like to stigmatize it and make it complicated and harder for them, I think, in a lot of ways. But I think when you recognize what it is, and that it's like this sort of chemical thing in your body, and it's happening to you.
Yeah.
And to sort of recognize that, I think helps to sort of understand it.
Yeah.
And to sort of then get the medication or whatever, however way you would like to sort of like deal with it for yourself. And to be, I think it does create a lot of openness and what you call it, self-love and stuff.
Yeah, self-love.
In a lot of ways. And that's like really, I mean, I feel like from the outside, it looks like, from my side, I see a lot of self-love and self-care.
Yeah.
But I think internally, it's really complicated and it's really hard, and like, there's a lot of moments where you're like, this really sucks. I really, really do not want to be here. But from the outside, I see a lot of like, self-care, self-awareness, and time taken to sort of really do what's needed to keep yourself together, and like that effort is amazing.
Like, did any of like toxic masculine experiences that you may have had in your life, like, were any of those sort of experiences put into like your characters to help shape your characters?
Yeah, I do like the idea of what I like to do is to sort of make that apparent, make these sort of toxic moments apparent, and then having other characters be aware of them. So just talk about them openly versus it being sort of this. Because I think there's a standard in not all forms all manga stories have this, but I think the majority of the more popular ones have this very masculine-oriented sort of culture, which is very much part of Japanese culture.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, being in the States and being like between Senegal and the States, it's like and that's what Saturday AM does. It's about it's like a diverse lens and open narratives that are like based on each of our own experiences. So so I tried to sort of really think about the experiences that I've had and how either moments of toxic masculinity or not, once that moments have been part of my growth.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
share those.
I mean, toxic masculinity has been like a big reason for like why I got into manga, because I was sort of like I probably got into manga because of My Hero Academia, because at that time it was like 2019, 2018, but I was in like the worst mental state of my life, where I was not very happy because I had like a lot of toxic people around me. And then my friends showed me like My Hero Academia, which was the one which is still my favorite anime because it has some sentimental meaning to me. I literally have like 26 of the books in the back there. So but yeah, the morals in that story helped me get over like my self-harm and like my depression because of like my friend introducing me to this. So manga and just like anime in general has quite a big impact on my life, and it's what led me into like wanting to do art. So I kind of didn't know I was passionate about it until I was sort of introduced to anime. So it's always had like sentimental meaning to me.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of people might overlook like anime or manga because they're like, oh, it's for kids, but they don't realize the more moral values and like life lessons it can teach you. Like,
exactly.
If they say that, they should watch A Silent Voice. Damn, that anime is sad.
No, there's a lot of. I think My Hero Academia is definitely. It's really good. It's really well written.
Yeah.
And I love the manga a lot more than the anime because of the drawing style is ridiculous. Like this dude is really drawing, like and definitely like a serious line worker. And so yeah, I really like the like reading manga a lot more than watching anime. But also his stories is just so good. Like it's just this idea of having a mentor and really being passionate about that mentor and also growing into yourself. But they've done it in a way that like it's so much about admiration versus which is a relationship to a lot of like toxic masculine characters who see who see past admiration or are just looking for power or something like that in a very simple, boring way, whereas I think in My Hero Academia, Midoriya is like always, very aware of like other people's feelings versus just like what he has to gain from them. He's always very gentle and very kind and listening. And that it becomes most of the story is him just sort of like dealing with emotions instead of just putting it away and being like, I just need to keep fighting. Like, like I don't care about how I feel.
Like I think what was most interesting to me, like sort of relating back to that, was I feel like your book sort of goes into emotion too with like when you were describing Second Skin, and how it's like a shadow form. Because there was this person, I think they were called like 27 or something, that had numbers and stuff, and they couldn't control it, and then Umi after that manages to control her second skin like it's no problem. So that made me think that it also shows like to master second skin you have to have some sort of emotional strength behind it, and the fact that she sort of gets outcasted from the start made me think that like emotional strength from like being the outcast gave her
and made it easier for her to manage the second skin.
Yeah.
And you can
That's
see
it,
her
bro,
mental.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it comes from this old philosophy in East and Western Africa that destiny is in the form of a shadow, but it's like the shadow is so both like attached to you but not at the same time.
Yeah.
So this idea that it is a perfect replica of you isn't completely real. And so, like destiny, it can change. Like destiny is free form.
Yeah.
And your relationship to your shadow is based off of like a real, like almost a human relationship. It's like your shadow can also be angry at you and not like you and be upset at you, and so you have to sort of like deal with that relationship.
Yeah. And that's when it could like change form if you get too angry or like too depressed, because it takes control of you, which is like why you were saying in your book, if it changes shape too much, you won't be able to go back to your original form. And I thought that was a really cool detail that you added. Yeah.
For sure.
What would you say to someone who is struggling with like toxic masculinity or anything?
I mean, it's similar to what you were saying earlier. It's just like, you know, doing the best you can to sort of either find people, you know, you're like-minded people like you can trust, and if not that, you know, like resilience.
Yeah.
Stay true to yourself completely, and I think a lot of power comes from that.
Yeah, that's exactly true. What ways do you deal with it when you're like struggling with something? What ways do you deal with your problems?
It's me.
Yeah.
I dance. I like to dance a lot. Yeah, you know, I'll be up in there.
Yeah.
If I'm feeling any type of way, you know.
I've always wanted to learn to dance.
I mean, I have energy. I exude a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So if I'm feeling down, I usually like I have to do something that that gets rid of a lot of my energy, or I talk with people. That helps a lot too.
I've always wanted to learn to dance. I can't lie. Never
Yeah,
learned.
learn. You just get up.
Yeah.
Put your favorite song on.
Speaking of being masculine though, let's talk about World War II, because there's a lot of masculinity to unpack during the war. Because men took on this idea of
The warrior type of masculinity. So you're asking, what is that? Well, let me explain. Masculinity changed because they had to deal with the harsh climates of war, where they had to learn to be enduring, have the ability to suffer, and have courage and strength.
What's interesting about this is that homosexuality and masculinity had a big correlation in the war, because men wrote letters back to their wives about how they had intimate relationships with other men during the war. And these letters describe romantic gestures such as kissing and other fruitful things. The men who didn't participate in the war were given white feathers by women to class them as unmanly. What's like healthy masculinity, would you say?
Just being comfortable with who you are and not exactly caring about what other people think.
And how would you help other people be more healthy with their masculinity?
It's not exactly something you can help people with. It's like you go for it on your own and you end up finding out things that will help you in a way. But no one can help you with it. No one can help you change. It's something you have to do on your own, you know, in a way.
Yeah. What is the hardest thing about being a man?
It's the expectations.
Yeah.
Because we're expected to do certain things all the time and act a certain way. And it's, in a way, you want to live up to them expectations to make people happy. But then again, you want to just be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like, because there was so much pressure in like high school to be this big dominant person, and it's just like, I'm not that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a hard thing. But like, I think we should stop that, because like a lot of those stereotypes came from the war, because they were taught to like, you need to take all this pain, You need to be courageous and like suppress that emotion. But then we sort of applied that after the war, and then it just kind of ostracized men into like having to be that, even though we don't need to do that anymore, because we're not in a war. We're not in a war zone. We're just trying to get through life now. So
yeah,
I just think it would be a lot better if we taught men that they don't need to be this dominant, strong person. They can show emotion too, and that there is that healthy masculinity.
Yeah, it's a lot with emotions with men, because a lot of the time we get told not to show it, to hide it, and just be manly about it. But that's why there's a lot of mental health issues with men.
A lady known as Elaine Showalter stated that the war feminized men because the supposedly female experience of being powerless clashed with the idea of needing to be a warrior as a man, therefore led to a crisis of masculinity, and the war broke down the Victorian ideal of what being masculine was. I think her statement showed how rooted toxic masculinity was in society, because the argument used internalized misogyny and homophobia. Coming the 1950s to the 60s, the rules for men were more about financial power, because they were more providers in this time because of rationing. So capitalism and money was a big part of being in the man's world, especially since women had to stay at home, also because the war ostracized men's emotions so much. They could only go back to anger and sexual dominance. This allowed men to go on and have the best college years of their life before they became financially successful. However, men were tired of having to suppress all their emotions and be this big, angry, dominant person, and wanted to protest about that. Hence why we got the men's liberation movement, started by Joseph and Robert Lewis, with the publication of 5 different books in 1974. And the aim of this movement was to speak up and focus on the negative ideals and ideas of traditional masculinity and what men had to live up to in society and how it affects them. This is why in the 80s we saw a big fashion change and a lot more self-expression with men, and even makeup and men came back as a trend, because by this point people started being out there more and more expressive, because they didn't have to deal with big events like rationing or the suffragette movement, so it allowed people to focus on themselves more. And hence why we got singers like Boy George, Elton John and Prince. We got a lot more self-expression and gender bending. This also meant there was a diverse range of fashion styles, to rock and roll, rap style, goth, even because the 80s was about being rebellious and more out there.
I think what I learned here is that gender stereotypes change all the time, and men especially have these emotional expectations that they need to live up to. So what we really need to do now is stop making men internalize their own emotions. It only ever leads to more violence and discrimination because they can't be who they are. So how does this handle now? And what's the real reality of men's mental health today? Well, let's find out.
To me, anxiety is something that engulfs you and feels like you can't escape it. It's something that creeps up behind you, and you begin to bellow in anger at the monster overshadowing your sense of worldview. Only to realize that it was your thoughts all along, and the monster was your self-doubt and judgment criticizing the clear path set up ahead.
Hello, my name is Alex. Welcome to this interview on toxic masculinity, and your name is?
Alistair, but you can call me Ali.
Hello, Ali. Well, I'm gonna ask you just a few questions today. What's like healthy masculinity, would you say?
Just being comfortable with who you are and not exactly caring about what other people think.
And how would you help other people be more healthy with their masculinity?
It's not exactly something you can help people with. It's like you go for it on your own, and you end up finding out things that will help you in a way. But no one can help you with it. No one can help you change. It's something you have to do on your own, in a way.
Yeah. What is the hardest thing about being a man?
It's the expectations.
Yeah.
Because we're expected to do certain things all the time and act a certain way, and it's, in a way, you want to live up to them expectations to make people happy, but then again, you want to just be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like, because there was so much pressure in like high school to be this big dominant person, and it's just, I'm not that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If you weren't so judged by men, what would you do, like as a woman, as just like a daily thing? Because like I think if it was me, like I'd like change my clothes and be more open, like with what I wear. I mean, I'm sort of working towards that now. I'm still not very confident though. Like I guess I'm kind of like half anxious, half confident. I'm still dealing with like my old school and everything that I kind of went through. I'm still kind of living in the past, but I'm trying to move forward. But yeah, I'm definitely a lot more open with my emotions than I was. Well, I think I've always been like an emotional person, and I'm okay with that. But like, I'd say I'm more open about them now. But the situations and what I'm dealing with now are different, but I'm enjoying what I have now and everything that's going on, and it's been really exciting. But yeah, I think someone was telling me yesterday, another guy was telling me in an interview like a few days ago, I can't remember, that he would wear more feminine clothes in like public, because like he liked skirts and stuff. So I think he said he would be like wear more feminine stuff, even though I don't think clothing should really be masculine and feminine, like especially back in the day. Like high heels were invented for like Persian soldiers to like help have better grip with, you know, like the things that go on the horses, so they could like fight better on their horses, which is what like high heels were invented for. But then they kind of became more gendered by the 1800s. And also I think, as well as like being more expressive with like our clothing, I think we should, I think I'd talk to my friends more about my emotions. I mean, I do that now, so I've definitely done that goal now, but like, it's complicated because a lot of men, I guess, would feel like they can't do that. I mean, what would you do?
If I had a chance to, you know, not get judgment, I'd do everything. I'd do everything because, okay, let me tell you, there's only one life. You know, Ariana Grande said, sorry, not Ariana Grande, Camila Cabello once said, you have only one life, so do whatever makes you happy before the end comes, because you don't want to waste your time on what, you know, if men are judging you, ignore them. Just wear whatever you want, do whatever you want, even if it seems stupid, just do it, you know? You will have a lot of memories from this.
But, like, I think a lot of like women are especially more scared now because of like the whole Sarah Everard situation with like the policeman who murdered her when she was just walking home at night. I can't remember exactly the story, but I think women should be allowed to feel like they should be more safe alone at night, definitely. Beep beep to you. But yeah, I think to change, we have to be the ones to make the changes. Like Rosa Parks didn't make the change with like racism and discrimination without being adamant and staying in that seat on the bus. So we have to be adamant with ourselves too and make those changes. But I think we have to start for this sort of situation in primary school and teach like little boys that it's okay to show emotion and be emotional, and that we're all human at the end of the day. So we all have emotions. So and we should all be allowed to be who all we want to be. Women, men, anyone really. We should be able to feel free to express ourselves and not feel shame from expression and our identity, because we are who we are at the end of the day.
Everyone's perfect, you know. You don't need to make any changes about you. Just do whatever makes you happy, and don't listen to people like not my teacher, but she worked at my school. She once said, okay, you guys have 3 options to choose from your GCSEs. Don't listen to your friends. Do something for you. Don't listen to your friends, because at the end, if you listen to your friend choosing the same GCSEs she does, you might not like this later on. So choose something that goes from your heart, even if you might not like it at first. Take something that you like. You don't want to end up taking the wrong subject. And the same applies to, people. Same thing applies to if you're a man or a woman alone. And sometimes when I walk past people, I think, are these people talking about me? That's what I feel like. But that's not true. I had my elder sister. She had a friend who had he thought that people were looking at him, and he ended up taking suicide. It's a too fun to talk, because I remember how she ended up going to the funeral, and because not many people talk to him, and he thought people may not like him because they're not talking to him. So always make sure talk to people, and do the best to supervise them, to help them with their mental health, because you never know what's going on. Always approach, always talk to them, make them happy. Try to support them with everything that's going on. Even if they might not want to open up about it, just make sure to bring positivity to them.
I think you have to let them open up themselves, but you gotta kind of unlock that door. You gotta get to know them first, and just let them slowly open up to you about stuff. So then you can kind of come in to help, to give them that insight that they really need. And I think that's important. But I don't think there should be such a taboo and weirdness about saying I have depression or I have anxiety. I don't think people should fake and say, oh yeah, I have this issue or I have that issue, because then it kind of it makes people with those actual issues not listened, because if someone's faking and saying they have this issue, then it makes the people who actually have that issues not taken seriously. So I think everyone should be taken seriously, and you shouldn't joke about that stuff. And we should just be more open with it.
Ever have deal with any problems with toxic masculinity when you were younger?
I dealt with it a lot, because the way I acted when I was younger, I wasn't exactly a chosen boy child. I was very into girly things and everything. But then, of course, my father, who is old, but his reaction to a lot of stuff wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be in a way, and same with my brother.
Not supportive then.
Yeah.
Wait, so was he homophobic then?
Yeah, he was. I came out to him around about 2 to 3 years ago. What wasn't the best reaction, but he's kinda come round to it. We just don't speak about it.
Yeah. What is the hardest thing about being a man?
It's the expectations.
Yeah.
Because we're expected to do certain things all the time and act a certain way, and it's, in a way, you want to live up to them expectations to make people happy, but then again, you want to just be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, because there was so much pressure in high school to be this big, dominant person, and it's just I'm not that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a hard thing. But I think we should stop that, because a lot of those stereotypes came from the war, because they were taught to you need to take all this pain, you need to be courageous and suppress that emotion. But then we sort of applied that after the war, and then it just kind of ostracized men into having to be that, even though we don't need to be do that anymore, because we're not in a war, we're not in a war zone. We're just trying to get through life now. So
yeah.
I just think it would be a lot better if we taught men that they don't need to be this dominant, strong person. They can show emotion too, and that there is that healthy masculinity.
Yeah. It's a lot with emotions with men, because a lot of the time we get told not to show it, to hide it, and just be manly about it. But that's why there's a lot of mental health issues with men.
Yeah. I read that in 2017, I think it was, that 75% of the suicides or something were male.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but it makes a lot of sense, because since they have to deal with so much emotion, they don't always realize their mental health problems, because they're just once again having to live up to this standard of having to be a man.
Yeah.
But yeah. Are there any questions you have for me about masculinity?
No, not really. It's just something all of us need to work on together in a way, because it's been about for so many years, and it's like the older generation's fault in a way, if you think about it, because a lot of them set the expectations, set them so men aren't supposed to speak about the problems, men are always supposed to be manly, and it's something that's slowly changing, but it's in a way it's not, because if you do look at the statistics, like you said, that a lot more males commit suicide than females due to mental health reasons.
But I think also more females deal with more abuse because of male violence from that suppression.
Yeah.
So I think it would. I think I was saying to the interviewer before, it would help if we did if we were just had something in primary school or something, so they could be believe that it'd be okay to show emotion later on.
Yeah.
So maybe just allow them to express themselves.
Yeah.
And then by the time they get to high school, it wouldn't be like that, because it would just be. Well, obviously there's gonna always be bullying or stuff, but it would be better.
Yeah, because they'd actually speak about it.
Yeah. Did you have to deal with any masculinity in high school, toxic masculinity?
I dealt with a lot. I got bullied for the first few years of high school. That's why I ended up leaving. But it's more or less something I ended up learning to deal with. And I know you shouldn't, but it's something that I did, and it's something that it did make me upset and everything. And I do suffer with mental health issues because of it. And I suffered really bad in year 7 and year 8. But it's just hard in a way.
Yeah. Let me see. What would you do as a man if you weren't afraid of other people's judgment?
Anything I wanted, in a way. Because I'm not exactly afraid of judgment, but it's just hard because everyone wants to do certain things in life. Everybody wants to. So, say if you're really into drama and everything, but you have an expectation to do a manly job, in a way.
Yeah.
It's your parents expect you to be a builder or anything, or something that involves something like that. But it's more or less something that you need to just not think about the judgment and follow what you actually want to do.
Yeah, because I was grateful compared to a lot of other parents, because I didn't have ones that they weren't judgmental and they wouldn't expect me to be manly. They allow me to be more expressive.
Yeah.
And that has helped. It was just mainly high school that made me suppress my emotions a lot more. But I think I could have dealt with that a lot better if I had the right group of people around me.
Yeah.
But I didn't. But college is kind of where I found myself more. So
yeah,
I think that was what is great about college, because it just feels like a healthy environment.
Yeah, it's a lot more maturity here, so people don't exactly care as much. They don't really care who you are. Well, yeah, and they don't exactly care if you're gay, bi, pansexual. It doesn't exactly matter to people here, because they're all here to do one thing, learn and study what they want to do.
I think what's good about the creative media though is it allows you to be like expressive, and I think that's the great thing about media, is that you can do what you want for it if you have the idea.
Yeah. Same with any kind of arts area, because within performing arts, musical theatre, art, photography, it's all something that's very expressive in a way.
Yeah. But yeah, what was kind of weird for me was doing some like acting last year, because I'd never done that before, so like that was sort of stepping outside my comfort zone, and I'd never played a role really before, so I thought it was quite fun doing that. I mean, we never got the film finished because like everyone got really busy, but for the time that we did do it, I really enjoyed just like filming and editing it all.
Yeah.
And creating something. So what would you say is the hardest thing about being a man, and what does being a man mean to you?
So for me, being a man means being masculine. When I say masculine, I mean like you have to, traditionally, being a man means you have to provide for your family, you have to protect your family, you have to have a masculine feel to yourself, like you have to act courageous in certain situations that can be difficult or can seem very scary. So you just have to be protective, and you have to be on top of like pretty much anything. That's what I feel like being a man is and being masculine is.
But what do you feel about like men having to be dominant and this strong person and not being able to show emotion?
I feel like that is a facade most of the time, because there are a lot of men nowadays who are emotional behind the scenes, who are emotional, who are putting like a front. They want to act strong, they want to act like they're brave, but when deep inside they're struggling with certain things, or they can't speak up because they're kind of afraid of being judged for speaking up. And I feel like it's a facade nowadays, because men find it hard to talk to other people about emotional stuff.
Do you think if we were like if men were taught in schools that they could express their emotions more, then that would make it easier to like talk about, if they're taught in like primary school how to deal with like all these emotions and why we shouldn't be manly and
personally, I think if men get more educated, they can be able to realize that it's okay, you know, to open up, not to bottle everything inside. And I feel like the more educated you are, the less knowledgeable you are in certain things, and the more you are to handle like sensitive information. So yes, going to colleges or going to get education will help men in opening up.
And also, I think it could help like the rest of society as well, because like since men are taught to suppress that emotion, it leads them to become violent because they've had to suppress it so long. So I think it would help the whole of society as well, and we'll get rid of that whole like. I think it could help with relationships. They were taught to like be more open with themselves, and then I also think that would help with like the toxic masculinity, especially in schools, where that's usually the most prominent. So I think teaching that is a very key thing.
Yes, it is, because the more that men are aware of that, the more they are conscious of not being toxic and towards others or towards themselves.
Have you ever dealt with like anything like anxiety or like depression?
I remember there was like this one evening for the year 11 students. I was outside the office waiting for my mom with my sister, and I said, oh yeah, I want to be a cabin crew. And she's like, you can't be a cabin crew if you're not slim, if you're not pretty, if you're not this or that, and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And then my other friend, she's like, we were once in art, and she's like, if you want to be an air hostess, you have to speak proper English. You don't need to speak proper English. As long as you can speak in English, they will give you the job. If you can speak more languages, that's good. You don't need to know more languages. It's optional, but it's better to know more languages.
I think it's better. Definitely better to know more languages, because it means you're open to jobs.
Yeah.
Because you have that multi-skill, I guess.
Have you had any like friends who've dealt with like depression or anything because of like masculinity?
Yeah.
Or is that too much of a personal question?
I don't know, it's alright. But yeah, I have had a few friends and everything. And sometimes it gets really hard because it does become, they can be depressed, they end up getting really bad anxiety, or they could even end up suicidal.
Yeah.
In a way, from toxic masculinity. And I was at one point where I just didn't want to be here because I didn't want to deal with it. But it's always something that when you find the right people, when you're in the right place, and when you've got people to support you, it does improve.
How did you sort of like overcome that whole depression, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what was your way of dealing with it?
It was a long process in a way. It's like, I still of course have my off days and days where I'm upset, and I do have anxiety, which causes a lot of problems as well. But it's more or less something that over the years I kind of learned how to speak about my problems, how to deal with them in a way.
I mean, because the way I learned to deal with my problems, because I was kind of dealing with some depression around year 11, so that wasn't too long ago actually, because like I'm 19 now, but this was in 2019, so this wasn't too long ago. But my friend showed me this show called My Hero, and then I kind of learnt from that show that to get over it, you need to not see it from like a normal mindset of, oh, I can't do this, I'm in like this bad situation. You gotta see it for like this outside perspective, like looking in and seeing it from that perspective allow me to see it as okay, I'm in this situation, but like I can get out of this and I can do this. I just need to strategize it, really. I mean, you can't apply that for everything, but that has helped me, and it got me out of a bad situation, and having him there was the best thing ever, because he just helped me through it, because like my other friends were kind of toxic, so I kind of just I kind of sent them a text like a few weeks ago saying I'm leaving you because I don't want them in my life. Really. But yeah, it's getting better, because I'm just learning to like dump all the toxic stuff in my life and allow myself to grow as a person. I'd say I've become a lot more happier because of it.
Yeah, a lot of people deal with it in many different ways. It's like, oh, everyone's got their own little way to deal with stuff, and it might not work for everybody, but it works for them.
Yeah, I think people need to see like failure as not as a fail, but a first attempt in learning, and allowing themselves to have that growth no matter like how painful you can be.
Yeah.
And just sort of like push through that pain, not in a suppressive way, but more like an emotionally getting it out sort of way, so it's healthy. Yeah. And also I'm lucky in the fact that my mum's a chronic pain psychologist, but she sort of free therapy, so so yeah, it was really nice having that. So I normally go to my mum if I'm having like mental struggles.
Yeah, I do too. She's the one who helped me through it all with my dad and everything, because she's divorced to him. Glad. But she also suffers with a lot of mental health issues, so we kind of speak about it to each other and get an understanding in a way of how we can help each other. What's wrong? If you're in some sort of mood, what can change it? Do I just need to leave you alone in a way?
Love that, the good old depression session.
Yeah, it's always nice having someone there that, you know, understands you in a way.
Yeah. What area of masculinity do you think men are being discouraged from?
I think experimenting. When I say experimenting, I mean like wearing makeup or like being themselves. When I say being themselves is like if a man feels like they want to wear makeup or when they want to wear dresses, they are heavily discouraged, especially in the Christianity family, for example. So that is heavily frowned upon and can be seen as an abomination to the extreme end of the spectrum. So I feel like nowadays, especially for my family, I'm saying, it's very discouraged, men wearing makeup or wearing dresses, because the society as a whole deemed that wearing dresses or wearing makeup is just for females, and men are not allowed to delve into that realm of experimenting and or expressing the sexuality. That's why you have a lot of men that are quote unquote down low, who feel like they need to hide, because if they are discovered, they may reap major consequences. So a lot of men are very discouraged towards that realm.
It's funny that you say that, because back in the Egyptian times with like Cleopatra, that's where makeup was invented, and they used to wear makeup as like a wealth status.
Okay.
So the more eyeliner like you kind of had on your face, the more wealthy you were. And if someone was ill, they'd put green eyeshadow onto that person. It was believed to like ward off the illnesses, because they believed that these gods Horus and Ra would kind of wear off whatever illness they had.
Yeah. Also, linking back to what you were saying, I was reading this article fairly recently about the ancient Greek society. They were very, when I say, because in like the the Olympic Games, male were allowed to, have a relationship with other male. It wasn't heavily frowned upon. It made men seem stronger in a way. I know it might sound a bit bizarre to you now, but I was quite surprised myself when I was reading the article. I was like, oh really? Wow, okay, I never knew that. So yeah, it just linked to the art. It just reminded me of the article I was reading, that the ancient Greek didn't frown homosexuals that much, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because when I was researching a documentary, I found out that it kind of got more like gender during the 1800s, because that's when it started becoming more evangelical and Christian. And then it got a lot more further during when Victoria was around, because she believed that men wearing makeup was like the sign of the devil and stuff. So therefore, like, men suppressed it more, even though they used to do it just for fun. So I thought that was really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Let's end the interview here. So
let's end the interview.
Thank you, Eric, for being here.
No problem.
I'm Alex Caton. Bye-bye.
I'm Eric Ibrahim.
Anyway, it was lovely doing an interview. Thank you, Alex, for the interview.
I think realistically we're the cause of our own change. And we see this with gender roles and economic masculinity. This is the cause of our own change. So what we can do now is talk about this, and this should start by having mental health classes with young men that teach them from an early age that it's okay to have or show emotions. These lessons can teach men how to deal with any mental health issues they may be having. This will also impact women, because it will lead men to be less violent from self-suppression. Which will cause a slight change, because men will be less suicidal from societal expectations and self-suppression. So therefore, all in all, it will be healthier for everyone.
Well, if I were to, my first instinct would be to say that I think the way it's manifested in my life has been mostly around mental health.
Yes.
Which I'm sure is a very common answer, as is often expected when men talk about their feelings.
Yes.
And I think a lot more men than people I think have experienced that. Certainly I've seen it in others a lot. I've had my own struggles with things like that. But I've had a very supportive group around me my whole life, which is very nice.
If you don't mind me asking, what sort of struggles did you have when you...
with episodes of depression. And at one point it was quite severe. But I took that crucial step that I recommend to anyone. I spoke to people about it. And I got the help I needed, and I did the things that I needed to do. And I don't necessarily think I had it as bad as some people had it. It's besides the point. Like you say, I made some good progress. progress.
That's being.
So I know people who really struggle with taking that first step.
Yeah.
I know how hard it was for me.
Yeah.
So you can't, you know, you can bring a horse to water, do as much as you can for other people, but you can't make them drink, unfortunately.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, I've had some experiences with that. I think there's an expectation to behave in certain ways.
Yeah.
So maybe not to be as emotional as you should be or you
Yeah.
feel like being. And also in terms of what you like.
Exactly.
In terms of your interests. You know, there's always an assumption that I like football.
Yeah.
It's a masculine sort of sport, but actually I have no interest whatsoever in football.
Same.
No interest in rugby. I have friends that do, but in fact they also understand that I have no interest. So yeah, there are certain expectations society puts on individuals, and that's about behaviours as well as your emotions.
How has it affected me?
Yeah.
I guess it affects me. Well, firstly, it affects every single man around my life, and therefore all of my relationships with any men in my life, my dad, my grandparents, my relationship with them is affected because of that. It affects me because a lot of my friends, I do musical theatre, and a lot of my male friends, that somehow seeps in the idea that certain arts aren't for men, which is really incorrect. It obviously affects me, toxic masculinity is why men shout at women in the street and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I live on a busy street and I am constantly, I can't leave my house without being harassed, so.
Well, that leads on to my next question. Have you ever dealt with male violence because men suppressing their feelings and then maybe taking it out on other women because toxic masculinity is built on misogyny?
Yeah, I've been shoved, I've been shout at, I've been hit, I've been chased down the street multiple times. I just recently, last week actually, had a man follow me down the street while shouting at me, and I went in the co-op to try and hide, and he stood outside the window going like this.
I'm watching you, bitch.
I'm watching you, I'm watching you, and I had to hide in the co-op for half an hour before
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, horrific. Not great.
Well, for me, really, it's more about the century that we're in these days, and so much has changed. Everybody should have that equality. Everybody should be equal all the time. And it's such a shame that with all the difference you have in the world now, that it's not, men and women have always been seen differently, especially with mental health.
Yeah.
And I feel like men's health is much more important than women's these days. We should have so many people that are suffering, but because men are men, they kept them silent.
Yeah, and exactly, because they suppress it so much, they don't even realise they're having lots of mental health issues a lot of the time, which leads to alcohol, and then that can lead to violence upon women. So
there should be a lot more support for men.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say directly affects us, it's more towards the perspective, but I guess it forces. I think it's had quite an impact on the men in our lives, such as our dad. That's definitely had an effect on how we've been raised, our brothers and things like that.
Kind of being taught that you shouldn't talk about your mental health.
Yeah, especially as a generational thing, how toxic masculinity has shifted. Different things like that. Like our dad is quite a repressed person.
Yeah.
Yeah, our dad's a big alcoholic actually.
Yeah. And that's definitely a big part of his mental health.
Yeah.
Probably one of the reasons is I don't think he's ever outreached to anyone to talk about his mental health.
Yeah.
He just kind of depended on substance abuse.
Substance abuse.
What it means to me, I suppose, is something very old-fashioned and faded now. Which is the perception of men as being rigidly breadwinners and in a hierarchy above women.
Yeah.
Which I think is very outdated, but I'm not sure that men or women know what's replacing it or what could replace it.
Have you ever had any experiences of male violence because like men are suppressing their emotions because it's not talked about enough as a woman?
Thankfully, not male violence, but because my work is as a woman in a man's world, I work in theatre as a technician. Then I have come across a lot of what you might call uncomfortable masculine behaviour, let's put it like that, which wasn't necessarily directed at me. I mean, as an example, you as a woman technician, you walk into a crew room which is full of men.
Yes.
Theatre somewhere in the country. Maybe not far from Stratford-upon-Avon, and without naming any names, and it's full of pornographic pictures. And I'm talking 40 years ago, so I don't know what it's like now. And the men look at the women who come into the room to see how they react to the fact that the walls are covered in pornographic pictures. Now that, to me, was the old-fashioned masculinity, if you like. Out of that group of men in that room watching the woman's reaction, suppose there are 10 of them. One will be almost a psychopath, and 9 will be sheep. They won't be able to say, I don't like these pictures and I don't like this woman being embarrassed, because there'll be one man in the room who thinks that it's great to do that.
Well, I think that's because maybe they'll think they'll be like, it'll be seen as like, oh, you're not being manly enough if you don't think this.
Exactly. Now that, I would say, affects the 9 sheep. It affects their mental health that way, I would say, because it's a form of tacit bullying. You're not allowed to say that you're uncomfortable with something because you won't be a real bloke.
If you were brave enough, what would you say to that then if you could react to it now?
Well, what I did at the time, which was to completely ignore it, and just deal with the question I'd come to ask and get the kit I needed, and then deal with the men as individuals outside that room. And of course it never got raised and it never got discussed. Now I don't know. It's a very academic question. It's not one that I can visualise really. Interesting, it doesn't happen abroad. Go to France, everyone's much better educated, they're more equal. Okay, they have to chop heads off to get there, but it's worked. And so you have a much more comfortable experience. So it's interesting, it's not, toxic masculinity is a national problem, I would say. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I get what you mean.
National stereotypes come in as well as the masculine stereotypes.
Well, toxic masculinity, I would say, growing up, in a predominantly, black environment, definitely ignored, and the effect of it is ignored. Masculinity, just see it comes as something that is like natural, and not necessarily toxic. So, as a man, if I do certain things that are toxic, I and people around me, tend to ignore it. But I know that it's a serious problem. And and people, especially the black community, need to do something to address it.
And I think a lot of people would say like it's wrong for men to express sex emotion because it's seen as more of a feminine thing, even though being feminine is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think we should just stop that whole stereotype together.
Gosh, I mean, that is difficult, isn't it? I really do wish I had the magic wand. I think men need to accept their feelings that they're having. They need to own, the anger and the sadness that they feel. Obviously, like a lot of that is to do with the way society is run and the patriarchy, it oppresses men as well. They need to recognize that and be able to process their own feelings. See therapy.
Exactly.
Please go to
therapy. My mum's a psychologist, so I kind of had free therapy when I was dealing with my own issues, so I didn't have to pay, which was great.
Awesome.
So, but yeah, when I was younger and still in high school, I dealt with a lot of toxic masculinity because
I had epilepsy when I was younger, so during high school I had to catch up, so I got called like retard and stuff a lot, and I was just struggling overall to the point where I just started like self-harming, and it was not a great time. But I sort of like found the people in my college and eventually dumped those toxic friends and just those people that I had in my life, and just generally feel happier since I've been making those changes, which is partially why I wanted to do the documentary.
Yeah, I think this is really great, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad
Thank
that
you.
You found it helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Be yourself and be confident to be yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't let other pressures influence how you behave or how you show, particularly emotion. I think that's one really important thing. I think we tend to show emotion as well as maybe we should.
Yeah.
Just be yourself.
It's like everything, talk.
Yeah.
If you can find people who will listen to you and who will talk with you, and maybe you disagree but you don't fall out, then hang on to those people.
Yeah.
And I would also say that when you do start to talk, people who won't come with you in that discussion are the ones you don't need.
Exactly.
So just quietly let them drop and try and stick with the ones who will have a discussion with you.
Because like I've definitely had experiences like that, because I had toxic friends in high school, and they weren't really because when I was struggling with stuff, they weren't really there for me.
Yes.
So eventually I just dumped them because I found my better friends in college and everything.
Yes,
so,
exactly. You're not guaranteed to find if you like, the true wood. You know what I mean? You get rid of the dead wood as you realise that they're not coming along with you.
But it's also, I find it interesting dealing with those people because it means you get their perspective on the situation in their everyday life.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's at the basis of everything, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's the old walk a mile in my shoes, bear up the grace of God. And if you're open to that, if you're open to people's perspectives, without judging and condemning them, then that's how you make progress, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
On every level, really, not just masculine, feminine.
But I think some people won't be able to see from the other perspective and will be very one-minded. I've definitely met people like that, so I think that's why it needs to be raised, so you can kind of show all perspectives on it.
Yeah, it needs to be raised because then eventually it might filter into the education system.
Yeah, exactly.
You're encouraged to discuss without judgment, without rancor.
Yeah.
I would just tell them to be more, conscious of, sort of things that they say. I think a good example would be, things that, men brush off as just banter. In sports injuries, for instance, like they call it like locker room jokes. So I just know it's okay. But for so long, they've been viewed as a norm. So I would say, men should be more conscious of, how they speak.
Don't be afraid. I'm telling you directly, don't be afraid. Mental health is such a big thing and it's so important. And to this day, it's not spoken about enough. So never be afraid to get help. I know it personally, so reach out and try and get all the help you can, and just don't be embarrassed or afraid.
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to make this documentary, because I feel like someone needs to speak about it.
Oh, definitely.
And
it's so important.
Rosa Parks didn't stop racism without sitting on that bus, so I'm making my documentary and making my stand.
Yeah, I really like that. I appreciate that, dude.
Thank you.
Actively, it's not just okay to cry, but actively encourage each other to cry and release your emotions. It's so important. You've got to, and hold each other as well, just hold each other, tell each other you love each other.
Well, I'd encourage them that, first of all, professional systems in place for this kind of thing these days are very sophisticated. My dad's a psychiatrist, so I know about some of this stuff, and it's very confidential. You can go and you can find somebody and share with them, a professional. It doesn't have to be somebody you know. No one you know has to know if you don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole personal thing. It's a whole personal thing, is what I was saying.
It's very personal. I would encourage people to share with people they know as well, though. If they're comfortable doing it, you'd probably be surprised how many people have gone through similar things.
Yeah, it's always that first step, I like to say.
We are